Well, this well is almost over, and while I was here, I read many, many books. I think more than I've ever read in such a short time. And although there was a mix, and I read some books, uh, I read The Betrayal of the American Right by Rothbard, and then I spent the next month basically reading books about Afghanistan, Iraq, and 9/11. And while I was reading them, just actually as I was finishing them, um, and let me just say the book I read on 9/11 was called The Looming Tower. The book on the wars in Afghanistan was called Ghost Wars, and the book on Iraq was called Imperial Life in the Emerald City Inside America's Green Zone. And one thing that struck me after I finished them was that, uh, and I'm gonna maybe do some more videos on 9/11 and on terrorism and whatnot. But uh, the claim is that these radical Muslims hate us because we're not them, which is actually not a completely baseless claim. It's mostly wrong. It is true that there are certain people within the Muslim world who do uh, look on people who are not Muslims with either with some level of disdain. Now, mostly, they either don't care because most Muslims are basically illiterate even about Islam, and they basically just have whatever the local customs are, and to whatever degree those happen to be Islamic is to the degree to which they're Islamic. Others look at it and they fear that maybe some polytheistic religions or atheism are really bad, but they don't think that Judaism or Christianity are that bad. Others don't like Judaism or Christianity, but they think it's something that would be tolerated. And there's a few who really think that everybody should convert to Islam. And this is like especially true if we're talking geopolitics of some of the members of the Taliban. It's clear that some of the people in the Taliban really thought that you should be a Muslim. And if you read some of the other writings, some of the early members of the Muslim Brotherhood, they almost looked at it like, well, people would be better off if they were Muslims, and so we should try and convert them. But it's only a very, very, very tiny number who think that, well, you should kill everyone who's not a Muslim, and that's not the motivation. That's not a sufficient motivation. All the political stuff that obviously Ron Paul has pointed out, and actually people within the federal government's anti-terrorism and diplomatic bureaucracy have been pointing out for decades, is that it's our government's policies that piss off the terrorists. But the point is that nobody at any point says, well, they hate us because we're not Muslim and we don't do Sharia. So what we should do is we should institute Sharia and we should have everyone in America become a Muslim. I've never heard anybody state that. Not only have I never heard anybody state that, but to even say it out loud is to almost realize how unbelievably absurd the notion is. As if we should all grow beards now and wear turbans and memorize the Quran and speak Arabic and have women wear uh, either veils or shawls or burqas or whatever, and that we should all do hajjs and pray to. No, but or in the case of the Taliban, I mean, the Taliban was outlawing satellite dishes and sorcery and American baseball caps, and uh, nobody says that. Well, these Muslims are really dangerous and scary and they want to kill us, and so the solution is to simply become like the Muslims. And I think everyone realizes that's a stupid argument. What does this have to do with the Rothbard book on the betrayal of the American right? It has to do with the fact that, absurd as that argument is, that's exactly the same argument that was made in regards to the Cold War and the USSR. So the idea was, yes, big government is bad. Yes, we need small government, or as small as possible, and government's tyrannical. But the USSR is evil and despotic, and so we should become that way. And William F. Buckley famously, explicitly says this, that we need a, quote, totalitarian bureaucracy for the duration. Uh, And for some reason, people don't realize how absurd that argument is in that case. Well, I think that they would realize how absurd it is in the case of, say, fundamentalist Islam. Nobody would take the claim that we should all convert to Islam very seriously. Yet, the idea that, well, we should institute a military-industrial complex and have an all-powerful state that has eminent domain, that has unlimited powers to tax and to spend, to create a giant military, and to have an empire, literally to have bases everywhere to fight the Soviet Union. For some reason, that argument is persuasive, and obviously, the most obvious counter argument is that what's the point in not wanting to be the Soviet Union if you're just going to become that? You know, if we don't like Islam, then becoming Islamic to fight Islam does not make any sense. Even if it's risky to go another route, that's the way to go. Now, William F. Buckley is an interesting figure, and I think it's easy maybe to overemphasize because he explicitly said that he favors a totalitarian bureaucracy for the duration. That's not to say that every single conservative who ever lived between now and then explicitly says that. You know, what I think it is, though, is most conservatives are not as intellectually explicit as Buckley is. I don't want to say Buckley's intellectually honest. I don't know about Buckley enough to know if he was really being sincere. There's lots of debate that he may have actually been working for the CIA. He seems like a smart enough guy to have known what he was saying, and it seems like maybe he had an ulterior motive. But most conservatives say they want small government, and that they're for small government, and they're against big government, but then they favor all these blatantly big government things. And the reason that they do that is because they don't even see it as a contradiction. They don't look at it in terms of Buckley and saying, well, yes, that is a totalitarian, big government, socialism, but I accept that for as long as there's a Soviet Union. Most conservatives look at it and just don't see it. Look, they go to the parade, they see the flags, they hear about the bases and the military spending, and they just don't even imagine that could even be anything other than, you know, what they believe in, and they don't believe that it could be socialism or communism or big governmentism. And this is, of course, extremely annoying when people hold contradictory views and they don't even realize it. You know, at least Buckley rationalized. Now, it turns out his rationalization was a lie, because when the Cold War ended, he did not call for a return to normalcy after 50 years. I am told, I'd like to look more into this, that not long after the Soviet Union fell, there was some kind of meeting among several prominent conservatives, not in the sense that they are going to control the world kind of meeting, not a Bilderberg meeting, but just like some kind of conference. And there were people there like Buckley, like obviously William Kristol and Pat Buchanan. And Pat Buchanan, who of course I could find lots to disagree with, but I think he's really good on this issue, said, look, the Cold War is over. We need to, you know, get back to like a militia basically and cut back. And the other conservatives there said, no, we don't want to do that. We shouldn't do that. We should take advantage of the unipolar moment, our sole superpower status, which of course they've now squandered, as inevitably they would. And I think the reason is that most conservatives are not minarchist at all. And this is explicitly the case with someone like William Kristol. Now, of course, there's a whole story there that he's a neoconservative and his parents are Trotskyites, and he's probably a closet communist or something. But even more generally, lots of conservatives, they love big government. They love a parade. They love to take vicarious pleasure in watching, you know, satellite images of drone attacks, or talking about Delta Force or some other military unit as if the exploits and abilities of these tax-subsidized organizations somehow makes them more manly or something. They derive some kind of vicarious pleasure out of it, and they're for that. And then if at some point they realize that maybe big government is bad, then they just disassociate the two and just imagine, well, big government's bad, but I still like all this militarism, which they just absurdly conclude must not be big government. Uh, and it's very, very annoying. And it's also, I mean, I think the whole point of the analogy with Islam is just to show how retarded the argument is, because that's ultimately what the when you ask people why do we need such a big military, why does it have to be that huge? There is no argument other than the one that well, we need to protect us from the very thing that it represents. You know, the fact that we have this big military is a big government over us. You know, and so what's the claim is, well, we needed to keep another big government from taking over. Well, that doesn't make any sense. It's really, really annoying. And not only that, it can't protect you, as 9/11 again proved. All the intelligence spending in the world can't protect it. I saw in the debates some very disgusting sociopath asked, I think he was the head of the Heritage Foundation, he said, well, 42 terrorist attacks have been thwarted since 9/11. Well, I believe 40 of them were provocateured by the government. I mean, that's not Alex Jones, that's just 40 of them were provocateured by the government, and the other two were not stopped by the government. They were stopped by regular American citizens, like the people on the underwear bomber plane, or the people who pointed out that Faisal Zazad had left a bomb in Times Square. It wasn't the government, it was the populace. And so for him to then just jump to the conclusion that obviously we need the Patriot Act to last forever, it shows you that these conservatives don't really care about limited government at all. They care about big government. They are just nationalists. They're just nationalists. Maybe they realize that big government kind of sounds bad, so they just say they're not for big government. I mean, Paul Wolfowitz made a point of saying, look, we need to have foreign aid, and George Bush was a conservative Republican. He gave out billions and billions of dollars. Hence, it must be conservative, and you all can get on board with it, right? And unfortunately, that absurd reasoning is very effective with a huge part of the electorate. And so, yeah, it's kind of disheartening, but it's true. It's going to take some kind of horrible disaster to make people wake up. Although in such a situation, it's just as likely that such a horrible disaster would end up making people just give up the pretense of even believing in small governments. Oh, we should just have a fascist dictatorship to take care of us.